Welcome back, everyone. It's Peter Tragos, the lawyer you know, and today we're talking more Jussie Smollett. You may have heard by now, he is out pending his appeal and not serving that 150 days in jail as the trial court obviously wanted him to do, starting right then and there for 150 days straight. Let's talk about why in today's video. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and like the video if you've been following all the Jussie Smollett content, because today is a very interesting twist in what we thought was coming. The trial court clearly wanted Jussie Smollett to serve 150 days straight, starting the day of the sentencing. He did not give him time to get his affairs in order, and this was at a time that Jussie Smollett and his lawyers were not sure whether or not he was even going to go to jail. As we all heard, probation is more common for a charge like this, and it was a surprise to some that he got 150 days plus 30 days of probation. And the court said he was not going to stay the jail time for an appeal, but it turns out it is not just this trial court's decision, and Jussie Smollett's lawyers appealed to the higher court, where a 2-1 split decision voted in favor of Jussie Smollett to be able to be out of jail pending his appeal. There's a $150,000 recognizance bond, meaning if he flees, they get $150 from him and there'll be additional charges and they'll go get him, etc., etc. But at this point, what really matters is Jussie Smollett is getting out of jail. He's actually already out of jail pending his appeal. And what we're going to talk about in today's video is whether or not that is fair. So without hearing any of the facts or factors that I'm going to talk about on today's video, I want you to get in the comments and say fair or unfair as to whether or not you think it's fair that Jussie Smollett is now out of jail pending his appeal. So let's get to some of the factors and whether or not we think this is fair. The first thing, there's a quote by Jussie Smollett's attorney that says, "The real question is, should black men be walked into jail for a class 4 felony? Shame on you if you think they should." This is a statement I agree with and disagree with, because should black men be walked directly to jail for being convicted of a class 4 felony? The answer is sometimes. And if you say shame on anyone who thinks that is true, and it's not just black men, white men, black girls, white girls, whoever it may be, any people that are convicted of felonies, if they're convicted felons, there is the chance they walk straight to jail because it is a felony, the more serious of the two categories of criminal offenses that we have. And the United States legislature and all of the individual states have prison time as a potential punishment for felonies. So why is it unheard of and shame on anybody if people think they should have to serve the penalty for crimes they were convicted of? If you don't want to have any chance of being walked to jail, don't get convicted of a felony, right? I think we can agree with that. And just to say on shame on everybody who thinks this is true is not fair. But where I do agree with her sentence is that if it's an unusual situation like this, where it's a class 4 felony, which is one of the least severe felonies, you shouldn't expect to be walked straight to jail. You should have a minute to get your affairs in order. If you have an appeal, you should be able to appeal it, because if it's not normal and this is a harsher sentence than normal, you should give yourself the opportunity to appeal to make sure this is okay. Then okay, I can understand where she's coming from. They could say, we were expecting probation, we didn't get it, that's fine. Give him a week to get his affairs in order, and then he'll go. Let us file this motion to get him a bond pending his appeal. Give us time to do these things. Then I understand what she's talking about, and I can understand her sentiment in the quote, even if I don't agree with the quote in its entirety, and shame on anybody that believes the laws are written correctly or that they should be followed. So I've mentioned some of the mitigating factors already in talking about why Jussie Smollett's lawyers think he shouldn't be in jail. Let's look at them kind of categorically and look at both sides. First is the severity of the crime. Now, we've talked about how it is in fact a felony, but not the most serious felony. In fact, it's the least serious felony. So that is actually low when we look at how serious the crime is versus somebody who's been convicted of murder. It's much less likely they would be let out on bond pending an appeal. The likelihood of success of their appeal, and at this point we're not really sure. There is the double jeopardy aspect as to whether or not what the first state attorney did, letting Jussie Smollett go, dismissing the complaint for him doing community service, that could be a pretty good point for appeal. Maybe they think that's likely. Maybe they think that's something they considered in this appellate court, that maybe he actually will win his appeal. But it's not just the appeal of the case, it's also the appeal of the sentence. And if this is an unusually high sentence, maybe the appellate court said, you know what, before we impose such a harsh sentence for this crime, let's let him get out on appeal so we can make sure it's correct. So the likelihood of appeal, maybe they felt was high that he was going to be successful in this appeal. And if you're more interested in that double jeopardy type argument, write double jeopardy in the comments and I'll dedicate a video to look at exactly what the previous state attorney did to let Jussie Smollett off and whether or not them charging him a second time was actually double jeopardy, because I do think it's an interesting conversation. A third factor is the evidence against Jussie Smollett. Now this is an aggravating factor. The first two are kind of mitigating because it wasn't a super serious crime, and maybe he does have a chance at appealing at least the sentence, if not the crime itself. Well, the evidence of the crime is great, it's heavy, it is large against Jussie Smollett. It seems like at least the trial court, the jury, and everybody believed Jussie Smollett absolutely did this, and the evidence was damning and it was clear. So that's going to be an aggravating factor when you look at the evidence against him. However, when you look at whether or not he is a threat to the community or a danger to the community, the answer to that is no. That's probably a mitigating factor. He's not really a physical threat to the community. Again, this kind of goes into with the crime charge. It wasn't a violent crime. He didn't hurt or kill anybody, so he's more likely to be let out on bond. Now, another factor is whether or not he's likely to flee. And this one is a mitigating factor, not aggravating, because he could have fled at any point because he was out on bond the entire time waiting pretrial, waiting sentencing. So he's not really likely to flee. Plus, he has ties to the community. He's got a lot of people that would vouch for him. So he's not a candidate to really flee these charges. And he's only looking at 150 days in prison, not life. So it's unlikely that he would flee and add worse charges on top of what he's already dealing with. Plus, there's the $150,000 bond, which may not mean a lot to Jussie Smollett, but it's a pretty high bond in a situation like this. Now, the last factor is the injustice that it would be having him sit in jail waiting for his appeal. And a lot of you probably are not going to agree with me on this one, but the injustice here would be high. It is a huge mitigating factor, and I think the largest mitigating factor, because when you have somebody that got a higher than normal sentence, you want to make sure that not only is it correct that he was convicted, but that the sentence was just. And if you have a situation that he's going to serve the entirety of this sentence, for sure, without a doubt, 150 days are going to pass before this appeal is come to fruition, before it's completed, before it's resolved. So he is going to serve that penalty, even if an appellate court finds it unjust, finds it too harsh. So that's injustice number one. Injustice number two is the 30 months of probation could even be done by the time he is done with the appellate process, and therefore he would serve the entire penalty of this crime that he may win on appeal. They may even feel like he's likely to win on appeal, or at least serve the jail sentence that he's likely to overturn, according to the appellate court maybe, because they let him out on bond. So the injustice of having somebody who's either innocent or too harshly punished serve that entire punishment before they're able to go through what is their right in appellate process that we have in this country, that injustice could be very high, especially on the flip side where you say, listen, if it takes 2 years to go through the appeal and he loses, then he'll serve his 150 days. So we're not losing out on that punishment. We're just making sure the punishment is fair before we force it upon him in a situation like this where it's a class 4 felony, only 150 days in jail. He's not a high flight risk. He's not a danger to the community. When we weigh all these factors, it seems more or less of an injustice to have him out on bond pending appeal than it would be if we put him in jail, make him serve a sentence, then he wins his appeal. That is something none of us should want in our country, no matter what we feel about Jussie Smollett. So after hearing those factors and hear me kind of break them down, where I even surprised myself that I think, yeah, maybe he should be out on bond pending appeal. Did your mind change? Let me know in the comments. Say my mind changed or it did not change based on the factors we discussed in this video. And let me know if you have any other questions about Jussie Smollett. If there's anything else you want me to break down, including that double jeopardy aspect, let me know in the comments and I'll try to jump on it at some point. But for now, that's all we've got. Thanks for watching this episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you like this content, please share it with your friends. Make sure you subscribe to our page and like our videos. If you want some interaction, get in the comments and we'll be sure to get back to you. If you want to know any more information about our firm or this page, you can find out in the description or visit tragoslaw.com. We post multiple times throughout the week, so make sure you hit that bell so you can get the notification and not miss out on the next episode.